Good evening and welcome to Poland Daily. I'm Nicholas Richardson and this is the news. We begin with the NATO summit in Vilnius. During the two-day meeting of the heads of government of the North Atlantic Alliance, key decisions will be made, the genesis of which is the war in Ukraine. We already know that Turkey and Hungary have agreed to Sweden's accession to NATO, and the Ukrainians have heard a clear declaration that they will be in the alliance, although a specific time frame has still not been given.
One of the key decisions of the summit is the creation of the NATO-Ukraine Council. This falls far below the expectations of the Ukrainians. It's unprecedented and absurd when no time frame is set neither for the invitation nor for Ukraine's membership, while at the same time vague wording about conditions is added even for inviting Ukraine. It seems there is no readiness neither to invite Ukraine to NATO nor to make it a member of the alliance. I understand President Zelensky's frustration, and of course this is also a move to motivate NATO members at the Vilnius meeting to be more sympathetic towards Ukraine. Alliance chief Jens Stoltenberg came out to meet the expectations of the Ukrainian president and presented a package of 3 proposals for Ukraine, including changing the accession process from a 2-stage to a 1-stage process.
Dzisiaj państwa NATO zgodziły się na to, żeby wysłać pozytywny sygnał dla Ukrainy. Oczywiście jest to sygnał wsparcia, ale chodzi także o zaplanowanie drogi przyjęcia Ukrainy do NATO.
President Biden has been saying for months that Ukraine may join NATO only after the war is over. The enthusiasm of Ukrainians has also been tempered by Germany. Poland and the Baltic states, on the other hand, are actively lobbying for a fast track to include its eastern neighbor in the North Atlantic Pact. We are also looking out for the interests of our neighbor Ukraine, which has been, as we know, at war for more than a year, as it defends itself against brutal Russian aggression. And we will do everything to ensure peace. It is in our interest that Russia must withdraw and leave the occupied territories of Ukraine, that the primacy of international law be restored. And we firmly believe here that NATO as a whole, as the strongest defense alliance in the world, will support Ukraine in this. Just yesterday, before the summit began, NATO chief Jens Stoltenberg discussed Swedish accession to the alliance with Turkish President Recep Erdogan and Swedish Prime Minister Ulf Kristersson. The meeting ended with an agreement. However, this is not the last step on Sweden's long and bumpy road to NATO. President Erdogan has agreed to forward Sweden's accession protocol to the Grand National Assembly ASAP and ensure ratification. After the start of the Russian aggression against Ukraine, Sweden and Finland declared their desire to join the North Atlantic Pact. Although Finland had already become part of the alliance in April of this year, Ankara refused to support Sweden's accession. President Erdogan justified his decision by fearing the spread of Kurdish-backed terrorist organizations. The course of Sweden's NATO membership depends on the fulfillment of the matters enshrined in the trilateral agreement. We want all promises made and signed to us to be kept. While negotiating Sweden's future, Turkey seized the opportunity to take up the topic of its accession to the European Union, which has been suspended in recent years. Yesterday, Erdogan also met with the president of the Council of Europe, Charles Michel. The topics of conversation included the possibilities for cooperation between the European Union and Turkey. I call on the countries that have kept Turkey waiting at the door of the EU for over 50 years. Be the first. Pave the way for Turkey to join the European Union. Let's pave the way for Sweden, as we paved the way for Finland. Turkey's conflict with the European Union has been going on for a very, very long time. On Turkey's part, there was no placing membership in the European Union as a condition to block NATO entry of Sweden, and this was a good sign. Just a day after Turkey's decision on Sweden, the United States gave the green light to sell Turkey F-16 fighter jets.
Biden has been clear and unequivocal for months that he's supported the transfer of F-16s to Turkey, that this is in our national interest, it's in the interest of NATO that Turkey get that capability. He has placed no caveat.
There is already talk that Sweden's accession to the alliance may take place on April 4th, the 75th anniversary of the pact. Thus, Sweden will become the 32nd NATO country. This means that as early as next year, the Baltic Sea will become an internal body of water of the alliance. 2, 1.
Ukrainian soldiers stationed near Bakhmut said on Monday that they are successfully pushing back the enemy in the area around the shattered eastern city, where Ukraine has been gaining ground as part of its counter-offensive. An artillery unit fired a Croatian-made multiple rocket launcher in the direction of the Russian troops. Croatia gave us this system. It is called RAK. Ukrainian makers installed the system on top of a Hummer vehicle, so now it is transportable, which makes operating the system faster. We are working in this area and we are successfully pushing back the enemy. We have destroyed the enemy's firing positions, ammunition depots. We have inflicted losses on the enemy in the past 2 weeks. The unit deputy commander, who only gave his call sign Barkas, told Reuters that after detecting Russian infantry moving outside Bakhmut, they targeted and destroyed it. On the outskirts of Bakhmut, movement of enemy's infantry was detected, and it was hit by a multiple rocket launcher. This week we see the enemy is retreating while our infantry is advancing and clearing the area. What else can I say? They are not motivated, they do not advance, but they are firmly entrenched. They are trying to restore the previous status quo, but they have no luck thanks to the efforts of our infantry and artillery troops, which provide support to the infantry. So we are repelling them near Bakhmut. Ukraine said on Monday its troops had caught occupying Russian troops in a trap in Bakhmut. Russian accounts of the fighting said Moscow's forces have repelled or contained Ukrainian advances in the east and south. More than 500 days into the invasion, Ukraine's counteroffensive, which began early last month, has focused on capturing clusters of villages in the southeast and moving in on Russian forces holding Bakhmut. The Ukrainian military said its troops have now retaken 24 square kilometers around Bakhmut since the counteroffensive began. However, Reuters could not verify the situation on the battlefield, and Russia has not acknowledged Ukrainian gains. Moscow says fighting has been heavy since the counteroffensive began. Its forces still hold swathes of territory in eastern and southern Ukraine, following its full-scale invasion on the 24th of February 2022. Drone footage has shown disastrous flooding in the town of Ludlow, Vermont, in the United States after heavy rain. New York and Vermont were the hardest-hit states, and more precipitation was expected overnight and into Tuesday, creating further flood hazards, according to the Weather Service. More than 13 million Americans are under flood watches and warnings in New England, the National Weather Service said, after weekend storms inundated rivers and streams. Vermont officials were calling the flooding the worst since Hurricane Irene reached the state as a tropical storm in 2011. Parts of Vermont had already received between 7 and 8 inches of rain, turning streets into raging rivers.
Earlier today, while overseas, President Biden approved my request for disaster declaration for all 14 counties. This will help mobilize federal resources to support our response and recovery efforts for this unfolding and ongoing disaster. Irene had about a 12-hour duration of rain, and then it was over. The sun came up, everyone went out, we were able to assess the damage, everything was receding, and we went back towards the recovery phase. This is different. We've had like 48 hours of steady rain, of that same intense rain that we saw during Irene. So 4 times the amount of rain. And again, we had rain previous to that we didn't have during Irene. So the ground was already saturated for this storm, and it's been raining ever since. And that's why I'm very concerned about the next few days. We will have the sun coming out this afternoon. People will think this is over, but it's not over, because the rivers could still rise. The water has to go someplace. The reservoirs are filling up.
Early on Tuesday morning, the Wrightsville Dam, which forms a reservoir north of Montpelier, had 6 feet of storage capacity remaining, the city's manager said on social media. Several rivers in the region were expected to crest well above their flood stage on Tuesday. In central Vermont's Johnson, the Lamoille River was at 21 feet, some 5 feet above its normal flood stage, the National Weather Service said. That's the news. Thank you for watching. Stay with us for the weather, Poland Daily Business and more programmes. But from me, it's have a good night and a better tomorrow.